Islamic framework? Like, how have you found it on a personal level for yourself?
On a personal level, I think it's helped me personally to see things in a different way. It's helped me to be, personally, I feel it's helped me to turn things and look at it in a positive light instead of negativity. So I think as a person, it's helped me quite a lot, I think.
Where would you say you took your meaning and truth from before then?
It's about knowing yourself, knowing, that theory. And
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest thing that I got out of this, as simple as it is, as very simple as it is, but sometimes we don't think of simple things in life, right? As simple as it is valuing things, like how you can overvalue your children, you can overvalue your own parents, you can overvalue and undervalue and whatever.
Yeah.
And I think to me that was a massive lesson, because sometimes, especially when it comes to your children, I think we have a habit of overvaluing our children.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And also, in terms of value, it's not about person. Sometimes I'll do something and then it'll bother me, and I'll think, how much value should I give to that? Mentally, why should I let it bother me?
Yeah.
Is it going to matter in a week or 2 weeks? No, it's not.
Yeah.
Forget about it. Move on. So I think as a person, this course has helped me a lot as a person. In terms of what I've taken out of it, unfortunately, it doesn't seem much.
What do you mean?
We've done many weeks of learning, and I just personally feel I can't remember a lot of things.
Retention.
Yeah, I can't just remember a lot of
Yeah,
things.
yeah, of course. No, I wouldn't worry about that.
That could well be in where I am in my personal life,
Yeah,
where I've gone from self-employment to employment after so many years. I went in one job in April that had 3 months training. Just when the training ended, I got another job, which put me back in training. So I've been like learning there as well in training. Then I've got this, and at the moment, especially, truly speaking, especially now at my age, do you know what I mean? Like I'm 50, do you know what I mean? My brain's not like the youth, like sponge weight, take it.
You have to recognize your capacity and capability in it, and
so it becomes heavy.
Yeah.
I don't think the knowledge is solely for retention.
Yeah.
I think we all look at it from a perspective or a lens where at times it can feel as though if I don't retain the information, I am not going to understand anything.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. The reason why I basically asked this question is because today we're going to probably already covered it. I think we already have covered it. It's more sort of going over it and recapping it. But the stress, anxiety, and depression is the biggest module I feel that the community of today and the people of today are struggling with the most in terms of how you regulate it. Now, when you journey across the Islamic channels through the prophets, through the Prophet himself, and through the Quran, especially 96 different places, we talk about mental health that we've probably never been acquainted to before in our lives when it comes to just channeling it through the Islamic lens. But from a personal lens, everybody here will channel different emotions and externalize it completely differently to how you would, to how Nabil would, or how Yasin would. Everyone's different here. Yeah. But having knowledge surrounding it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only way forward. And going through this module, there's so many, like, alhamdulillah, you know what, Khalil loves to do this. So if you're listening, Khalil, this is for you. But he throws you with a lot of gems, and so this was an opportunity to sort of go through this module and course, alhamdulillah, which he taught us 2 years ago. And I found so many statements that he mentioned at the time through different saints or scholars who came, and one of them was from Imam Ghazali, where he says, it's not Allah doesn't test you in the number of deeds or the number of things that you do in relation to, for example, like even this, is not going to hold you accountable for how much were you able to retain of the knowledge. It's what feeling you were able to take out of it and how you were able to externalize that.
And that's why, like, what you talk about the personal experience and the personal development that you've gone through, I always preach that personally to everyone. I say, take it on board for yourself before you look to do it as therapy and counseling and look to practice in that sense. Because I personally feel that human behavior is that you practice what you preach, and you can only practice what you truly believe in and what you actually embody for yourself. So if you're doing that already, you might not retain the information on a parafashion kind of like being able to memorize it word for word and all that, but you can contextualize it. And the same way in which you apply it to your own life, to contexts and situations of your own life, you'll be able to see parallels and see patterns on when other people bring their own situations to you and be like, this is how I handle it. And I recognize I handle it in the correct way because I practice it from the correct framework. I know I do that. I know I've changed my kind of perspective. I've changed my point of view. So yeah, I might not understand the concept word for word. I understand it in my own kind of way, and you make it your own. And so yeah, like Mona said, I mean, you don't have to memorize it word for word in the same kind of connotations and the same kind of wording and all that kind of stuff. But if you can get the concept across, if you can get the principle of it across to someone in your own way, and this is why everyone will have like unique specialisms and unique kind of cases assigned to themselves in particular, because you will have a way in being able to make it a reality for someone in a way different to how Maulana Fayaz might deal with things, how I might deal with things. And that's why everyone has their unique specialisms, because we excel in very particular areas of our lives, and we all connect with people differently as well. It's always a soul-to-soul connection when you're doing counseling and therapy. And so if you can connect to a soul in a much better, and you can relate to them in a much better way than I could, you're going to be able to do a much better job. Even if I've had a few years of experience or whatever it might be, you guys are probably going to be the best men for the job. So it's not about how much you know, how long you've been doing it, this, that, and the other. It's always about the sincerity, the authenticity, the implementation, and essentially just at its foundation, correct knowledge. And this, if you correct knowledge doesn't mean you're reciting the ayah verse for verse, and that's why you'll hear a lot of alims among us, right? It's like to the best interpretation, to the nearest meaning, because it's about getting the knowledge across, not the text word for word.
Yeah.
Nabil?
I think it's a lot of things in perspective. For example, I would just see anxiety, stress, and depression as one bubble, but knowing where they come from and whether that stress is worthy or unworthy, I think put a lot of things into perspective.
Yeah, that's key. Worthy and unworthy.
How would you define worthy and unworthy stress? What would be, you say,
For
worthy?
example, if you're stressing over someone else's issues just because they're some family or friend close to you, yeah, I've taken more of a backseat in that.
Yeah. Principle 1 and principle 2, essentially, right? It's about
And a lot of stress is principle to the external. A lot of your stress, anxiety, and depression can come as a result of that initially, which seeps into principle 1, because you take it on too much, and then you don't know how to take it from the internal to the external, which is what we really struggle with. So yeah, inshallah, like today, what we're going to do is we are looking to, inshallah, go through, as a recap model again, go through certain sort of trends over it, etc. And I did want to bring in a little bit of the Quranic element and themes, and how our Prophet ﷺ at certain stages was able to comprehend the element of stress, anxiety, and depression in his life. Because let's not get it twisted, he had a lot of it. He suffered with it just like us humans struggle with it, to a very great extent, where Allah had to intervene and had to come and tell the Prophet, you're not mad. Certain statements like that. You're not mad, Ya Rasul. He had to then tell the Rasul, calm down, get your thoughts together, know who you are. Stop keep on praying to me. وَإِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ فَارْغَب. Come to your Lord once you're finished doing what you were sent down for. Subtle messages of growth, of moving forward, understanding how to feel, but realizing that feeling is an important emotion that you should be able to comprehend, but at the same time, don't dwell on it too much. SubhanAllah, amazing. So, Jazakallah for that. Brother, sorry, what's your name?
Ahmed.
Ahmed, go on. Inshallah.
Me, I haven't done module 2 to be honest.
Is it? Okay.
So
First one for you.
yeah. There's a few reasons, but I spoke to Khalil as well. So I came for the module 1 recap, and what I learned in that lesson, I learned more than the whole online, to be honest. So I said to them, start coming to the in person, because we had I learned. So I had a look at a few bits, but generally speaking, so I've always had an Islamic framework, you could say. I couldn't able to bring the Western side in, like the terminology and stuff like that. So I think for me personally, that's helped a lot to see the secular side and also the Islamic side, bring them together. Because when you deal with people, obviously, generally most people like the secular side, they're not really
Interested
but
in, yeah.
the answer in Islam, it's always been there, just about finding it. And I think that's what's been amazing about this course, just made it so clear, bro. So you don't know all the research and we just take the fruit. We're taking the fruit basically. That's the way I see it, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, similar sort of themes. I've had a background in mental health, so I've worked in mental health, and I've seen the secular side, but the Islamic side I've not really touched upon. So it's nice, organised. But I've also had that in the back of my mind, so I've always wanted to dip my feet into the Islamic side and the Islamic framework, and either join them together and see the truth really, and like organise it all basically. So it's really helped me organise everything from the Islamic perspective, from the secular perspective, and bring them both together.
I think when you say about the seculars, I remember we were discussing this a couple of years ago. That the secular realm of psychology and the themes of mental health, they'll always try to push or find you a source of emotion to help you get over one emotion. So it's like the Islamic framework will always sort of channel the correct behavior through the correct means, but for all. It's like even though everybody is individualistic in terms of how they approach things, the amazing thing about the Islamic framework is that there's always one theme that is pushed across the whole, basically across the whole realm, from the Rasul, from the prophets, up to ourselves, even the Sahabas, and the saints that came, for example, Imam Ghazali, etc. Their themes and their modules were all the same. They never changed. It was always the ayah of قُلْ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. My sacrifice, my prayer, my living, my dying is for the sake of Allah. Everything was relatable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The moment you do that, you channel your feelings way more better, because you're now using that as an alternative or an outlet for you to channel, to understand and comprehend how to get over certain challenges that everybody will go through on a day-to-day basis.
As opposed to the secular way, which is like avoid stress, avoid anxiety and grief and depression, something not to come near to, right? But it's the duality of the fact that we realize is, like we said, unworthy stress, the stress that is worth our time, worth our kind of energy and all that kind of stuff. It's not an illness. It's not something to kind of stay away from. It's not a mental illness or mental deficiency. It's something to know and to recognize and realize and understand of how it can be used and how it can be worthy. It's like you can have worthy stress. You can have stress where it's like a powerful force and it kind of kicks you into gear, right? And it's like, I've got a deadline, I've got an essay to write or a piece of work to finish off. If I didn't have stress, if I didn't have that kind of fire lit under me, how would I get it done? And recognizing that is a duality of it.
And I'll tell you why it is so key in Islam that it is important and it is relevant and we should talk about it. It's because in the Quran, the Arabic language, the grammar, the connotations of the Arabic language are amazing. And there's reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings about certain verses in certain transcripts in a certain way. So, even in the Quran itself, I was showing Imran the other day, and I really want to go through it with you guys today, is there's different wordings in the Arabic language that he's used towards mental health and depression and anxiety for different prophets. So for Yusuf alayhi salam, he used the terminology of bathi and huzni. So these were like complaints and sadness. So that's an element of mental health. And then towards the Prophet Musa alayhi salam, he used a different connotation because his fear and anxiety was from a place of fear of Fir'aun. It wasn't a sadness of Fir'aun. It wasn't a sadness of the time. It was because he was fearful because he had a knot in his tongue. He couldn't speak. He wasn't eloquent enough. And he knew that in order for him to get his message across to the people, you have to be eloquent, right? That's how we feel. Some politicians only get the way. I don't know if you guys are football fans, but Ruben Amorim right now is only in the job because he knows how to speak. Otherwise, he's a poor manager. So, exactly that. Words come a long way, but the Quran excels in that because it brings about that connotation to teach people that that was Musa alayhi salam's fear, but that was still attributed to his mental health, subhanAllah. Even though it's a fear, it was still attributed to his mental health, and the Quran wants you to implement that theme and into the stages of what the prophets were going through. Ayyub alayhi salam, everybody knows his story, how he was riddled with sickness, and to the extent his complaints became so severe because the whispers of shaitan, that's also a mental health problem, an ailment of stress, anxiety, and depression, the whispers. So these different Arabic connotations that were brought in the Quran, subhanAllah, were brought for many reasons. There was a reason why Allah brought this language in different places, was to teach people that the mental health realm of the anxiety, stress, and depression is real, is worthy, it's worth talking about.
Would that be linked to the diseases of the heart then too?
In what sense?
In the sense of like fear, husband, all of these we would see as a disease of the heart, because it's not a disease of the heart, but like the emotions linked to the heart rather than mental health. But the West obviously would say it's mental health. Like Ayyub alayhi salam, for example, the whispers of shaitan.
So
It's whispering to the heart, right?
It's the heart, but it's also the mind. Everything is holistic. We can't take something solely as being either mental or spiritual or physical. There's an effect holistically in all three areas, right? So you're right. I mean, the emotion, you could say, is a matter of the heart. It's like stress, anxiety, well, not stress, anxiety and depression, fear, all these kind of things. Definitely emotions felt in the heart. There's pull by the nafs, and that has a sway on certain things. And then your interpretation and the knowledge that you hold about fear, about stress, about what is to be feared. There's human instinct and that which it's like fight and flight. It's like if something comes to attack you, you take a step back. It's just human instinct. And that's maybe instinctual, but then there's learned stuff as well, and things that you've kind of maybe been brought up to say, stay away from here, stay away from this person, these kind of people, and you've been told to be fearful, and that's an element of knowledge from the mental element as well. And then from the physical perspective, also in terms of fear, it's like, again, talking about fight and flight. Do you run away when you are fearful, or do you stay and you fight? So there's a correct place for all three of these to be kind of actioned, interpreted, felt, and there's an incorrect way as well. So definitely, I guess that's where it stems from, like you said, from the heart. How it's then actioned, how it's interpreted is also just as important, because you could probably recognize it as fear correctly, but then you action it completely incorrectly.
Terminologies like disease of the heart, etc. I think that is quite harmful to put and place on a human being, solely because what the rationale of a human being, or just being here on earth, is to solely grow through that experience and move forward with it. For example, like Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he says there's many ways of attaining paradise, and we have to attain a paradise here because the greater paradise is going to be eternal, right? If you don't know how to supplement and regulate in this world, how are you going to be able to enjoy the eternal? And he says one of them is knowing Allah. So even through these emotions, you get to know your Lord as a result of that, because you channel your emotions correctly for the sake of God. Another one is knowing yourself. Firoz mentioned that today earlier on, because this has been a personal journey for himself. That's also an experience that you go through these emotions of stress, anxiety, depression, that you learn a lot about yourself. Imagine the Prophet ﷺ himself, he learned a lot about himself when he journeyed at different stages. For example, when he was at Taif, it took him a journey of 8 to 9 years to learn about himself and how he needed to change to get his message across. That was also a level of depression and sadness that he had within himself at that period. And I think finally, just before we move across the room, it also helps lead and give people a pleasant life, because you become, I won't say you become comfortable with it, but you become aligned to understanding worthy and unworthy stress.
But when you say the Prophet ﷺ was sad, not depressed,
I think it was both. He did become depressed. He was sad to show his emotional standpoint from a human perspective, because he wanted to get the message across to his companions that he was human. So the sadness came from that element. The depression element came from the element of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaching the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that you're no one but a human. Yes, you're a Rasul, but in order for us to come across and move from that time period was the factor of the greater message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to sort of get across as a result of that as well. So the depression stage didn't come from a place of unworthiness. I don't think it was unworthy to, he went into that stage. But there was many lessons for the Rasul in that, because he needed to grow through that to propagate the message.
And it's incorrect placing of things, right? Stress, anxiety, and depression is always going to be placing things incorrectly. And so I guess even utilizing the Prophet ﷺ as an example, it wasn't a case of the fact, like Mawlana said, that it wasn't worthy. It was worthy, but it's being placed maybe too high in value in the sense of the fact that the Prophet was upset about the fact that the people weren't heeding the message. He wasn't able to turn their hearts. And Allah was telling him, right, that that's not for you to worry about. You place the godly kind of value of things and what Allah is responsible for, leave that to Allah. You do your job, and it's like you tie your camel and then you trust in Allah kind of thing. It's like you can't stop the fact that your car might get stolen, or your camel might get robbed, or that someone might go astray. You can give them the advice, and it happens the same in counselling as well. We're not going to be able to save everyone, and our job isn't to save everyone.
Yeah.
And this is why we say we're teachers. We're not guiders. We don't give guidance. Guidance comes solely from Allah. We provide the knowledge, and it's up to the individuals to take action and to put that into perspective and to utilize that as their perspective. So it's always about whether or not things have been placed correctly or incorrectly, given the correct value, or they've been overvalued or undervalued. And whether you're looking at stress, anxiety, or depression, that's always going to be the case.
And the answer to that was in Surah Al-Duha itself, where Allah had to sort of shake the Prophet and say to him, it's a new day, it's a new dawn. The first verse of that, وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى, is literally, it's a new day, it's a new dawn, Ya Muhammad. Wake up. What the hell is wrong with you? That's literally what was the message. And then it's broken up into 3 stages, the whole surah. One of them was just a reminder to be thankful. Why would he say that to the Prophet if he was, because he was bringing it from an unworthy place. His sadness got to such an extent that he wasn't utilizing it correctly. And Allah wanted to teach the Prophet ﷺ that if you're going to be a leader, how can you lead with that type of behavior? Hard to say this in many, you want to hear this, certainly not the mainstream, but that's the truth. That is the Duha framework.
And it's a great example. Of course, the Prophet came to be an example, so it's a wicked one to stick on. Is that it's always going to be an element of control. As human beings, like we want to control everything, right? Like whether it comes to our risk and we think that we're responsible for, hard work. If I graft, then I'll be able to get in the dough. But our money is already kind of set out for us. We're not going to change that. We know that Islamically. And it's always going to be this element of control where we're overvaluing the element of impact that we have on our own lives. It's like we think, oh, if I work hard, then I'll be able to be rich. Maybe if that's written for you, but if it's not written for you, are you ever going to get that at all? And it's like the same, I guess, as an example at the Prophet's time when he was worried about just how many people were coming to the deen, whether people were receiving the message, and all these kind of things. It's like, he goes out and does the work, but it's like, I'm not seeing the fruits of my labor. I'm not seeing people come to the deen. I'm not seeing people convert or revert and all these kind of things. But again, you're not responsible for that. It's like, do the work and just enjoy the work for the work. And that's true for our own lives as well. It's like, if you're going to be a grafter, if you're going to do hard work, if you want to earn dough, enjoy the process, because that instills all the correct kind of principles and values within you. If you're committed to something despite maybe not wanting to do it. We all know that's true for practice of Islam as well. It's like we don't always want to pray salah, we don't always want to have to do wudu 5 times a day in the cold or whatever it is, but it's the principles and the discipline that you attain through doing things for the correct reason, for the correct value, putting things in the correct place, It's like if I work hard, there's potential of it. But even if I don't, if I enjoy doing this kind of work, that will be my source of risk, and I'm going to be doing it through a means which I enjoy doing rather than maybe through a means that I don't. And also, what I learned through this is that I can control what I am able to control, rather than maybe working for someone else and not having control over certain things, all that kind of stuff. Control is like a massive element, I think, when it comes also to stress, anxiety, and depression. We're trying to control things sometimes, a lot of the time, that we're not able to control, we're just solely not responsible for. I think that's the case in many counselling and therapy situations.
Yes,
I think for me, it's been really good. A lot of the course for me is reaffirming, which is positive, how I do things and how I see things, right? So I've been through a lot and I've dealt with it, but it just gives me an appreciation, again, going back and looking at what events have taken place to lead me to the point where I can look at this information. And when you talk about placing yourself, correct knowledge, knowing Allah, all of these different elements here, for me it was reaffirming that I am thinking in the right way for a lot of elements, but there are still gaps. And then the knowing yourself part was really useful. I was just actually talking to my wife about it yesterday, but what I noticed I didn't actually realize it until recently, but in day-to-day life, so at work, for example, I go into work, I have a big meeting with the top shots in the room and things like that, right? So normally in that situation, I have a lot of anxiety. I'm thinking to myself, in my head, I'm thinking, what they're going to think, they're not going to like it, am I saying the right, all these kind of things, and I'll stress myself out before going in. Now, I didn't realize, but going into these sort of scenarios, I'm completely calm. In fact, I'm probably looking forward to it. The way I portray myself, the delivery of everything is so much more positive, clear, confident. And that's come from this understanding myself, knowing my abilities, but at the same time is placing Allah in the right place and knowing what I'm doing and everything I do is for the sake of Allah. Right? So I was putting too much value and importance with people in the room and their level and their titles and who they are, rather than realizing who needs to be on top of that.
Yeah.
And I think I've started to come to that self-realization piece. That was a huge benefit for me in terms of how I've changed as a person. So now how I approach everything is just naturally a lot more confident, a lot more committed, and not being worried about, oh, you know what, I'm going to do this wrong, or what that person's going to say, or what this person going to say and do, or whatever it is. It's just doing what I know is best and that I can do.
So apart from placing Allah in the correct place, which is great, does anyone, and I put the question out to everyone, apart from putting Allah, what other two things, I guess you could say, need to be put in the correct place?
Yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah. The world, isn't it?
And the world, yeah. Yeah, so again, in the psychological stress, anxiety, and depression framework, it's putting Allah, yourself, and the dunya in the correct place in order to ensure that you're valuing things correctly.
Because you become happy with the consequences as a result of that.
100%. And that's the thing, it's not like bad things are not happening and don't happen, but it's knowing and having that positive outlook, like you were saying, is having that positive outlook and understanding. And you can turn any bad situation into a good situation as long as you understand where it's coming from. If you know Allah, you know the teaching, you have the knowledge, you're putting things in the right place, you're putting the right value on life and things around the world. Everything becomes positive because you see it in a positive light. If it's bad, it's whatever's happened for a reason.
Yeah, of course.
Let's learn. If there's something to learn from it. But it's just that positive outlook and taking the positive from it, because ultimately Allah is there. Everything you do, everything that happens, you do what you need to do, and whatever the result of that is it is what it is, and there is benefit in everything, whether it's good or bad.
Because that's the default position that we're told to take as well, is the optimism, the hope, right? Is to have a good opinion of Allah, to expect goodness, because how we view Allah is essentially how we view ourselves.
Of the famous hadith, Ana inda abdi dhanni bi. My servant views me as how basically they view me. So if you view Allah from a place of fear, he'll always be a person of fear to you. If you view him from a place of love, you'll always love Allah. First, I think module when you guys went through, was the quote of Rabi al-Basri that Khalil must have shared with you guys, if he shared it with you, where her feelings and thoughts towards Allah were solely like, how can you even look at God from a place of fear, or how can you even have these sort of emotions towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He loves you, you know. He's created you the best, you know, of creation. We are the best of creations, you know. And that was one of the Hadith al-Qudsi, so direct revelation to the Rasul, was that however my servant views me is exactly what I will be to them, and nothing more than that. Your perspective of God won't change unless you change it. And that's the element that we have to work towards, is that we're always looking to change our thought processes and our ways and our actions, and Allah will open up avenues, and you probably will have seen this in your own personal journeys of growth, especially in life. The moment you start to make better decisions or better choices, because your understanding of the consequences and you're comfortable with it, the avenues open up, and then what do you naturally do? You attribute it to God. It was all from Allah. It was all from Allah. Allah did that for you though, because He's helping you grow through the ability to have that mindset. And subhanAllah, a big thing of this stress, anxiety, depression is that it's important to understand and comprehend it, and not shy away from it, just like our community used to all those years ago. But however, there's many lessons to take as a result of it. So channeling the emotions correctly for the sake of Allah is very, very important. So for example, a loss of human being, you know, that's not, you know, you need to know how to channel that emotion. You're not going to be there laughing. You know, we're not going to be sitting around the table, you know, all gallivanting and laughing about death. No, that's a correct emotion. The Prophet, he cried when Ibrahim passed away, his son. And then the companion said to him, "Ya Muhammad, you crying?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm human. That's my emotions. My tears will flow for the sake of God." But then immediately Allah gave him a reflection point, how to move forward with it. And that's what you're there in essence for your clients as well. When they're speaking to you, you're there to listen. You're there to allow them to heed that emotion and feel that emotion, that raw emotion that they're feeling, in a positive way. However, at the same time, you're there, like Imran was saying, to channel a better experience for them as a result of that, because whatever they're going through currently is all muddled, it's all chaotic, there's no way out, because they don't know themselves first. It's all the external which is affecting them. What are the common themes in the community today that we struggle with the most? One of them is your job. Like you mentioned, going into a room full of directors, we feel overwhelmed because they have a status, but they're no one but a human just like yourselves. They just feel that way because they've got a lot of confidence. So that's a raw emotion that they've been able to comprehend and achieve, and now utilize it to their power, which is confidence. Confidence comes a long way. So job is one. Another thing that really, really affects the mental mind is people. So, for example, if I was to leave here and I found that somebody was saying, Imran was saying this about you today, immediately your thought process drops. Did he say that? But we just met last week. He was so good with me. And now he's saying this about me. What does that do? Causes that chaos, that trigger, that mindset sort of starts to fall down a lot. But that's the nature of the world that we're living in, that we struggle with these concepts. Do we have the ability to take the correct action as a result of that? Do we pick up the phone, have a meaningful conversation? Or are we going to be people who are going to be swept away with thoughts that are going to kill us with anxiety and riddle us with stress? So the actions are there as a result of what's going on. Is, do we know how to direct it?
Because even
so
from
important.
Sorry, I was just going to say, because even from a matter of knowledge, like if you look at that situation that Mona was talking about objectively, it's like you've heard that from a second-hand source. You've not heard that directly from the objective truth.
Yeah.
You look at it and you're like, all right, I've heard rumors, I've heard second-hand gossip, or whatever it is. What level of valuation, what level of value, what level of importance am I going to give that? And like Mona says, I'm going to pick up the phone, I'm going to hear it directly from the horse's mouth. Like, you'd much rather approach it from that objective truth standpoint rather than placing value on what someone said, regardless as to whether how much we trust an individual, because we always have to take subjectivity into context as well. It's like, what, as the Indians would say, what masala has this individual kind of put on this?
Yeah.
It's like, what twist have they put of their own on this kind of situation? It's like, I've interpreted it in this way, they've interpreted it in that way. I didn't mean it. Context is really important. So just because they've heard maybe one sentence, maybe they didn't hear the entire conversation, regardless as to how good of an intention maybe this individual has. Like, you might have heard it directly from Khalil, but maybe Khalil didn't even hear it in the correct context or something. But you know, Khalil would never do that.
But
So
that's what riddles with a lot of problems in our society, and that is something that we all commonly go through. It's just a normal process of life, and that's why Islam is orthopraxy.
Yeah.
You know, that's why there's a holistic way of looking at religion. It's not solely from the lens of Quran and Hadith all the time. Islam extends beyond that. The realm of capacity of growth is the human mind having the intellectual capacity to be able to utilize themselves and do the correct actions and put the correct meaning in its correct place. And the moment you do that and you channel that meaning correctly, you are able to riddle away the stress that you would have had before, but you've now been able to comprehend and find a new way of unleashing this means within yourself in a better environment, I guess. And that's why it's so important that we don't conflate the two ideas together. That ritualistic practices and religion and the other realms of it. This is also religion. It's just a different realm of it. And that's in essence what the seerah was there for. It was there to teach the Rasul himself first, because he was going to be the one who was going to propagate to us. But he had to also go through the journey of being told the harsh truths in the love language of the Quran, which was very harsh at times. But that's in essence the idea of what we're all about here, and that's why this module is so important. Irfan?
For me, it was more about overvaluing certain situations, mainly from a domestic point of view. And in that, the stress and anxiety, identifying what triggers and how that would apply to principle 2, and then applying that back to principle 1. So I think the overall lesson that I've had through all that is patience. And with patience, that's taken me through the various stress and anxiety situations.
Tell us more. That's interesting, because that's a very different take to what everyone's really talking about value, but you've gone with the, I guess, the virtue of patience, which is great. I love that. But tell us more. Sorry. Like how in context.
So I mean, in terms of day-to-day things, where you there are disagreements, or you don't agree with certain things, to take a step back and not being reactive, and then looking back there, is that really important? You know, do I really need to be being stressed about that? And that's where the patience comes in.
Okay, yeah. I think that's perfect, because it goes hand in hand with value. It's a principle 1 element of dealing with stress, which is a principle 2 thing. It's the self kind of thing. You're bringing it back. It's like, am I giving it my time? As much as I maybe want to react, my nafs maybe want to maybe say something or do something, like you say, in a domestic situation at home, or regardless, even if it's outside of the house. It's like sometimes the ego, the nafs, wants to kind of rise to a certain level, but it's like, it's just not worth my energy, it's not worth my time. I don't want to get angry about it. I don't want to raise my blood pressure or whatever it might be. No, that's great. Yeah, I think that's a really good
It goes
one.
on to the 6 points of Carol Riff as well, the mastery of environment. So that's one of her 6 points, is the mastery of environment, where people they're able to master their environment to such an extent where they define the feeling of sadness or anxiety and stress, and they are able to make it worthy even if it started from an unworthy place, which is fascinating. So even if something was unworthy for you, for example, like the Gujarati theme of Panchat is unworthy, right? Of course it is. But it can come to a place of worthiness world is stressed for a lot of people. But that doesn't define who you are. It's just how you're calibrated at that moment in time. It can happen to a lot of people. I've seen a lot of people journey through this, and it's been a big deal for them, and they've not been able to comprehend it. Now, why? I'm such a good person. You know, I do everything right. Why me? You know, I try to do everything. I'm so good. I pick up the phone. I call people for da'wats at my house. You know, I'm always welcoming. When my daughter got married, I called 1,000 people. When people were telling me to call 350 people, that's how we become. We become riddled with so many, like, you try to spin it so much that what Carol Griffiths is trying to explain is that the mastery of environments is so important, where you start to master certain places where things have come from, but you define it. And that's Islam. Islam is all about definition and refining. That's literally all Islam is all about. Like, if you look at all the different connotations, like I mentioned before, about mental health and places of stress. So one of them is the terminology in Arabic, and I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago in my khutbah, and then I think after this we're going to inshallah move on just this last brother, and then we're going to go through the framework, and inshallah Imran's going to go through the graph itself. Is that in the Arabic language, like I said, it's just beautiful. Honestly, you know, when you look at the Quran and the reasonings as to why things are bought, it's just amazing. So one ayah, Allah SWT mentions, He says, Innal insana khuliqa halu'a. So Surah Balad, which is in the 30th chapter, Allah says, Laqad khalaqna al-insana fi kabad. So there's two words here, kabad and halu. When I was a kid, I used to listen to that second ayah. I used to think, oh, all humans are from a cupboard. You know? But honestly speaking, they're both states of a human being, and different states of anxiety. Ajib. So لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ, Allah saying that I have created humans in a state of anxiety, in a state of chaos. And then He says, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ خُلِقَ هَلُوءًا. He's using another word, terminology of halu'a, to also define anxiety and chaos, but from a perspective where He's giving a deeper meaning to that. What He's saying is that I have created human beings from this state, from the very beginning. So halu'a is defining where the state started from its very beginning. Why does He do that? Why does He bring that? Amazing. Because when a child is born, do they have the capacity to talk? How do they express their emotions? Crying, right? If somebody was crying here and they didn't give an answer back, how would you feel as a person? If, say for example, Firoz is here crying profusely, you can't talk. Firoz, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? And he's just crying. The person reciprocating that behavior, how do they feel? Frustrated, right? They're going to get angry. What Allah SWT is saying is that the root words of halu'a, it expands to the breast of a woman. And why is that so important for a child? Because the breast of a woman flows with milk, which soothes the child. And what Allah SWT is trying to say is that even in moments for a child who are riddled with anxiety and stress because they don't know how to comfort themselves, even in that, I have provided for them a woman who has the ability to basically bring out clean milk for them to be soothed. So Allah is even giving you the connotation in the Arabic language, saying that I know your state, and I've even created to the extent this minimalistic thing that you may view to be minimal, but it's done for a reason. Because if a child was continuously bringing about these ideas and this behavior, you would kill them. Because you would. You'd end up killing the child. Because you'd be like, I don't know what to do with this. Subhanallah. Amazing that God knows your state. And He's helping you channel that through the right means. And then He continues to say, He goes, even I know you to the extent that when goodness comes, or any element of good comes, you become so happy, you become elated, to the extent you even attribute yourself to a godly position. But when darkness comes, وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا, you literally become riddled in completely forgetting who I am, what I'm all about, forgetting what you are all about. And then He brings about solutions, which I love. He says, what calibrates you? Prayer. What calibrates your thought process in your mind? Doing external things. So number one is for yourself. So prayer is for yourself, because that's you channeling it via a worthy means. And then it's about literally moving forward with grace of doing something that's going to help you channel your emotions in a better way of giving your wealth in places where it's going to benefit others because it's going to benefit you for the greater good. So again, Islam understands, the Quran understands these definitions. Linguistically, why is it being brought forward differently? Is to channel and help the emotions of human beings via the means of what they're going through on a day-to-day basis. Brother, lastly, and then inshallah we move on to the...
Yeah, so what I learned from this module is kind of the difference between stress, anxiety, and so on, and where they sort of what's the source of them, where they're coming from, sort of thing. Because nowadays you very often hear people saying, "Oh, I'm depressed today." So you're not depressed. You might be just a bit sad or something.
Yeah.
You know, something happened because you overworked yourself. You're tired. It doesn't mean you're depressed.
Yeah, people always go to an extreme.
That's a different state. You know. So it's just good to just to know that difference. Forgot what I was gonna say as well.
That's all right. No, well, what would you say are the kind of defining differences between stress, anxiety, and depression then?
Well, stress in general is obviously caused by lots of different things, but then to turn it into anxiety, it's more of a sort of long term.
Okay, I think yeah, you're on the right track here. Go on.
Yeah, but it's a.
No, you're definitely on the right tracks because it does like I guess it leads us on to nicely what we're going to be talking about in terms of the framework now. So stress, it does. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of different stresses.
Yeah.
By definition, they're all principle two, as we were saying earlier. It's all external, and people get stressed about their job, about family, about finances, about kids, about various different things, the stress, anxiety, depression journey always starts off with stress because it's always a physical thing. It's always an external. It's always something which is internalized, and people will get headaches because of it. You know, some people get stressed out, and then the body reacts in a way where they get maybe hives or come out in rashes. People get restless, like the slide says, and you're always then in a state of chaos. You're always trying to figure it out. You're always trying to take care of it. What I find, and the thing about stress is, as we said, is placing too little value on the dunya. When it's not valued correctly, you always try to compensate by overworking yourself, or it also feeds into these labels now of like ADHD, procrastination, all this kind of thing. It's like you're undervaluing it, and so you're not doing the work. You're not actually doing what needs to be done. Your attention is always disassociated, and that sort of thing. So in terms of stress, it's always going to be this external kind of thing. Who can tell me then, if we move on to anxiety, a similar kind of definition in terms of anxiety?
Too much or too little value on self.
On self, yeah, so I've put up the slide as well, haven't I? So
Love it though.
yeah.
You know, I always remember my friend at university. I don't know, it was like 12, 13 years ago or something.
Yeah.
When you know, at the exam time in May, he was going to library every sort of afternoon. Yeah. From Dhuhr to Fajr, he was in the library.
Yeah.
For a month before exams.
Wow.
He used to come after, you know, he used to come home, wake me up for Fajr. Used to pray Fajr, go to sleep, and after the whole used to be in library again, all afternoon, all night, till like 4 a.m. or something. And libraries at university's time are full of students like that. If you come in the morning, there's no one there. If you come at Fajr time, full. Yeah, they all go to study, whether it's Muslim students or non-Muslim students, they all work like that for some reason.
I did that.
But yeah, it's very common. I never used to stress about exams. I used to just sleep at night. do your work. Don't stress about it too much, because the point is, this guy was, for a month, he was doing this every night, right? He was stressing so much about it. He was revising. Then the exam day came. He wrote his name, he wrote his whatever details. He fell sick, he had to go out. He didn't sit the exam at all. So all of this stress was for nothing essentially, right? At the end, he just left university, opened a business, and he's better off anyway.
So, in your opinion, I mean, what was it? I mean, of course, it's overvaluation of the
That's what it was, yeah.
of the exams, of the studying and all that kind of stuff. But then, if we now relate it to a level of anxiety, because despite whether there was heightened levels of anxiety or not, there's some level of anxiety, internalization, self, that is involved within that. What level of valuation or undervaluation is he giving to the self? And I open it up to everyone in that situation.
Yeah, I think there's two issues. One is looking at one's abilities. It's like, are you actually able to take this stress on, sort of thing? Because the situation like that is gonna give you some stress regardless anyway, right? But how do you actually cope with it? Whether it's when you're giving it too much value, it's stressing you out too much. Yeah, you just to a degree, obviously you couldn't cope with it.
Yeah.
Capacity, isn't it? Sorry.
Yeah, capacity and ability.
Capacity, isn't it?
Yeah.
Capacity.
It's a capacity where it says, what it says, broaden my chest. What does this normally
Expand your
say?
chest, yeah.
Expand your chest.
Expansion of the chest.
Capacity. So obviously this brother, it wasn't in his capacity to do what he did, and ultimately paid the price for it. Ultimately, so it's knowing your capacity, what you are able and not able to do. If you stay within your means, then you should be able to handle it. If you get out of your means, then that starts with stress, doesn't it? And then leads on to other things.
So, from a point of view of the self, you're saying that he overvalued himself?
No, never overvalued. I guess he did, because he obviously thought he could handle it.
Okay.
So I don't know if I'd still say he overvalued the exam still more than himself. But I would say he didn't recognize himself, his ability. He didn't know himself. Not overvalue himself. He didn't know himself.
His own capacity, his
own
capability.
capacity.
Yeah.
So in terms of value, I think he overvalued the exam with him not knowing himself or recognizing his ability. And that ultimately led to chaos, didn't it?
So when you break it down from a mental, physical and spiritual element of this whole context, you have to understand the mind, body, soul is so important when it comes to stress, anxiety and depression. So the intrusive thoughts of him being overwhelmed as a result of going into an exam, the consequences that could lead potentially to failing, that could be as an external reason, it could be his family, could be his parents who have maybe aided financially as a result. So his thoughts in that moment in time could be for a number of reasons. And those intrusive thoughts lead to the physical realm of lack of stability in actions. Because that's what's happened, right? There's no stability in how he formulated his actions in order to get to the exam. Because there was no routine, there was no rhythm, there was no stability. Because if you think about it, super athletes or people who are working on a day-to-day basis, you had a business, you know that if there's no lack of rhythm or stability and there's no routine, you're never going to get to your mean of financial gains, because you're never going to have any ability to be able to sort of handle the pressure of, number one, being in a market where there's multiple people who are doing the same things and being cost cut as well. So there's a number of things. So that's a big factor, is that the intrusive thoughts at that moment in time then lead to the physical realm being absolutely shattered because of the lack of stability. And finally, the mental thing, the spiritual thing happens is because when you're a person of God and when there's no awareness of God, I'm not saying this person was not aware of God. Of course, everybody has an awareness of Allah. But if it's not channeled correctly, what tends to happen is that the non-awareness of God in that situation leads you to a place where your actions stop defining who you should be, because you take it to places where it's uncomfortable for yourself, which then leads to disastrous consequences.
Yeah, because see, the question is, why are you doing that action? Who are you doing it for? A lot of people
Correct.
go to university or whatever. Why are they doing it? Just because your mom told you to,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah. So there's no correct meaning. So
Yeah.
the meaning. So, but the thing is that all of us here who have studied and who went through a journey of growing up, our meaning for doing things were completely different. For example, me and Nabil who studied, when I went into studying, it was just, listen, I don't even know what La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah means. Like, I just want to go there just to learn something. I didn't know all of this attachment of Moli Sahab, Maulana, what, this is what you want. I'm like, I didn't go in for that. You know, you go in for different reasons, but when you come out of it, you understand, what have I got myself into? You know, I guess the self expands as the self grows. That is ultimately the definition of life, even through these different modules that you'll go through.
And that's why I say knowledge is power. It's the more you know, the more options you have.
That's brilliant, right? Yeah.
But Yasin, sorry, I know you had an opinion on this, so share.
I know, I was just going to say, I had to rethink what I was going to say. No, I was just going to...
Was there going to be an attack to
where he got...
Yeah, I know. You have to be careful when you go down the
No, I was just talking about where he placed value, but he didn't place enough value, or he didn't know himself, like you mentioned there, but he didn't place value. So he put too much value on one thing, but then neglected what he would need from his physical perspective, what his body would, which potentially could have led to why, when he sat the exam, who knows, but what I mean is, he sort of neglected everything else and all the different elements and what he would normally do, like you're talking about routine, and just everything was valued on revising and trying to get that exam and learn everything you possibly could, but then due to having too much value there and neglecting everything else, then led to...
It sort of became a fight or flight situation.
Yeah, so I mean, I think everyone, in terms of the application of how you guys have applied the knowledge here, absolutely right. The point of view that I went with was that there was undervalue. The point of view that I take, just based on, I guess, the little that we know, obviously it's not a massive case here that we have too much information, but I would run with undervaluing of the self, because of the fact that maybe he's placing too much value on revision, perhaps, I guess, as a tool to be able to be successful at an exam, not taking into consideration, like you said, the rest that he might need, his capacity in terms of being able to retain information, how sleep is involved within that. There's no importance placed on the self. There's undervaluing of the self happening there in this equation of being successful at an exam. So not to say you guys are wrong. I mean, in context of how you guys have placed it, absolutely right. But I think it's probably a reality for a lot of people where they try to cram as much in because they think, yeah, if I revise, I'll be successful, kind of thing. But what part do you play within the equation of that, right? So amazing.
They create their own prison, and Mullen Marine said.
Exactly. Yeah. You hold the key, but you create your own prison. Exactly. Amazing.
So Sham says that, he said, a great quote from him, he says, Sham says, he goes, how you see yourself should be defined on how you see Allah. So how you see yourself should actually be defined on how you see God. And that is so important, that the self comes first before you actually build a relationship with Allah. And that's how it should be ultimately. Because if you define yourself from a place of, I guess, incapacitated or somebody who's not worthy, you're not going to value your Lord with that same worthy. You're going to value him in a way that you value yourself. And that's so deep when you think about it. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ was taught that how you view me ultimately is how you will view your life and what's to come with it.
So just to play down the devil's advocate here, with that point, right? For me, it's in order to understand myself and value what I do and how I do things. From my perspective, it needs to come from understanding Allah and knowing Allah and having that knowledge. And so, if I know Allah and what the Quran teaches us and what comes from Hadith, to then know when I do what I do in day-to-day life and place value on that based on the fact that what I'm doing ultimately is for Allah. If you place Allah in the correct place, then what you do for yourself and day-to-day, then
I see the train of thought that you're taking.
I don't think
The
that's, yeah, I don't think that's
The thing, yeah, I mean, I guess just to maybe take another approach to it, it's a case of the fact that what I'm saying about knowing yourself before you know Allah, and it is always the case of he who knows himself knows Allah. It's because you recognize your own capability and capacities, because everyone's Islam is individual to themselves. Allah is who He is, like you said. Allah is always going to be who He is, and I guess you could say that He should be the same for everyone, right? But everyone's perspective is always going to be different. So who Allah is to you will be different to who Allah is to me, and essentially His 99 attributes are all the same, right? But it's what you want from Him, what you need from
The
Him.
reality of Allah is no one can grasp, so it's not 99, it's infinite.
Infinite.
So we're just going to literally a drop from an endless ocean.
Exactly.
Whereas everyone had the same, it would be limiting.
Yeah.
Essentially.
But
Yeah.
even how you define yourself in terms of like, then your sort of thought process of Allah becomes even more defined, is what you value for what's to come. So even like Imam Ghazali, he mentions that if people can't comprehend the world in itself or its entirety and they don't value themselves as a result of it, just know that the value of the hereafter and the heaven and the future in itself within that realm is going to be just as important for you. And a lot of people's focus then shifts to that, so their consequences and the actions leads towards the greater good of where they're going to go. And I've seen so many people journey through that, and that's helped them in essence to sort of become better at dealing with matters of stress, anxiety and extreme sadness, because they know that. So for example, like if you were to bring an example to that, death is a big one here. Like a lot of people would define death in several ways and attribute it to ways that probably some people here can't comprehend just as easier than other people. But the moment you start defining it to the hereafter and that, no, inshallah, I'm going to be with that person, that's just the course of life, that's literally how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us, and you go with that mindset, a lot of the shift towards how your attitude towards that certain action taking place in that moment in time will completely change, because your narrative is not changed towards how you're feeling towards that. So the extreme sadness no longer is extreme sadness for how it would have been before, because now you've attributed to what Imam Ghazali says, that your focus is now shifted to the realm of the hereafter, where you know that the greater good will come there, because I will be with that person. I will be enjoying with that person eternally, forever, hopefully, for the sake of God. So it's how you place these things are very, very important.
I think what you guys said there, sort of the penny dropped in terms of, because in my head it's always everything I've done and how I've got to where I am is placing Allah in the right place, right? But you're right, in order, it starts from the self, because it's the individual that needs to then have the knowledge and to be able to put them in the right
It's
place.
like in Arabic and the like, the whole universe is within you. So
Yeah.
just exploring that.
Yeah.
And until you don't know your soul, so you know, everyone has an intimate relationship with Allah.
Yeah.
And it's never ending, it will never end.
But it's what you mean by the self first is it's that individual that needs to have that process and put everything in the right place in order for that to then fall into place and
Exactly.
in the right.
Yeah.
So it's on.
No, perfect. I'll clear up on anxiety before we move on to depression then we'll go on to the graph, and we're going to introduce a new principle as well, inshallah. So anxiety, as we said, is misplacing of the self, believing with either too significant or insignificant, and it's always an internal struggle as opposed to stress, which is an external struggle. As we just discussed, I mean, it's uncertainty of who we are, our worth, our subjectivity, our opinions. We don't know the self, right? It's like, and we don't have an intimate understanding of ourselves, or we have maybe too intimate, or we're too selfish, and we have too much of an intimate kind of relationship with ourselves. And so it can fluctuate on a scale of kind of, I guess, to an extent, narcissism and self doubt and low self worth, low self esteem, and all these kind of things as well. And then depression, inshallah. Who can tell me about depression? Inshallah.
Don't worry about that.
Shouldn't put it up there. I keep doing it. Who can tell me about depression?
Yeah, anyone.
Misplacements of Allah.
Misplacement of Allah, yeah?
Spot on. Okay. So yeah, it is. It's literally putting Allah in the wrong place in your life.
And so, I don't know if I mentioned this, in terms of anxiety, anxiety is always going to be a mental problem. So stress is the physical, anxiety is the mental. Depression now is where we come to the spiritual. As you said, incorrectly placing Allah, incorrect kind of understanding of the hereafter, this life, of the source of truth, all these kind of things, and how that kind of flows is where this can kind of come into place.
So
So
this is the reason I don't believe the Prophet was actually depressed. I think he was actually sad, and I get that, and maybe he was manifesting depression as a lesson. For example, when he forgot how to pray namaz, he forget. There's a lesson for all so many things. But how can the Prophet ever misplace God? It's impossible.
So you know when it says here, that's just a secondary definition of putting
I
Allah
can't
in
say,
the wrong.
sorry.
So basically,
That's anxiety.
oh my bad. There we go.
yeah. So basically, putting Allah in the wrong place or in your life, neglecting or misrepresenting Him. Prophet didn't go through that. Yeah. But this is just a secondary definition of what a lot of people now internalize depression to be as. However, his depressive state became to a state where he got to such an extent where he forgot to utilize his. There wasn't so his spiritual realm was separate to how his body and soul were attributing the levels of depression. So he never exhausted all the stress, all the levels of depression from mind, body, soul. He might have gone through the body, so there was an inaction on unhealthy habits, which the Prophet started to do as a result of that, because there was a lack of movement towards goodness. So why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have to say to him, "Ma wadda'aka rabbuka wa ma qala"? Your Lord has not forsaken you and He has not forgotten you. And then He reminded the Prophet of actions to do going forward in the last stages, where He says, وَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمَ فَلَا تَقْهَرْ وَأَمَّا السَّائِلَ فَلَا تَنْهَرْ وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. And as for the blessings that your Lord has given you, فَحَدِّثْ, proclaim it. So He's teaching the Prophet in essence that recollect your thoughts for the sake of your soul, because you're lacking that spiritual feeling. Number one, you're disconnected from love, you're disconnected from the goodness that you're doing, and the inaction of unhealthy habits. Why did He bring about going to an orphan child and just even stroking his head when He says, "What masail falatanha"? If you can't even give wealth, at least attribute it to basically going to them and putting your hands over them. Reason why the duha framework is so important from a depression standpoint is because what the Prophet was, and what we need to understand, which is a great point that you made, and it's a good thing that you called it out on, is he never had a spiritual imbalance. His spiritual imbalance was not there for the sake of God. However, he never knew how to attribute the feeling that he was going through from a spiritual lens and from a physical lens. That's the reason why there were certain words that were attributed in that surah, and in in A'taynak al-Kawthar, Surah al-Kawthar, the two surahs that came about, there were reasons why God used different languages in those surahs to define how the Prophet's spiritual feeling was at that moment, and how his physical, what he was doing, and what he needed to do to become even better and challenge this feeling that he was feeling. So it's subjective, depression, sadness, etc.
And just for my benefit as well, Mawlana, I mean, the context surrounding the Great Sorrow, the Great Depression, is what it's called, right?
The year of sorrow, yeah.
The Year of Sorrow. What was it in context? What was the surrounding issue?
So, okay, the Prophet at that moment in time, he lost his wife. Yeah? He had gone through a battle where now revelation, not revelation, so he had lost his wife, he had lost several children before that. the sadness was emanating to such an extent where he had lost his uncle, so things were happening one after another. Now, as a human being, your capacity is definitely going to be disheveled as a result of having hits constantly. That's just a normal human sort of comprehension of behavior that we all should have to understand. And the reason why Allah brought that forward for the Rasul was that he was trying to help him calibrate to understand it's okay to have feelings like this. It's okay to share your emotions like this. However, from a physical standpoint, in terms of himself, physically and spiritually, Allah felt that the imbalance was still there, and hence why the revelation had to be stopped, or it hadn't come yet, because the Prophet wasn't ready for that journey. In order to be ready for the next step, this is where the context comes in. It was to teach a lesson that in order for him to refine his emotions, there have to be certain things that you need to continue, which will help you work your way around any level of sorrow or sadness that you go through in terms of loss. So for example, when he lost his son Ibrahim, there was a greater picture to come as a result of that. Because number one, he was going to propagate the religion. And then the ayah comes way after that, way after the Prophet obviously way older now, that Ma kana Muhammad aba ahadin min rijalikum. The Prophet will never father a man. Why? Because he is a father to us. He is a role model to us. He was a role model to society. In order to propagate your religion, if you're busy and tied up with children, as we all are aware here who have got children, it's very difficult to sort of do other things without utilizing your children and doing and giving them all. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that the Prophet had to have clear focus, not in a bad way, but because he was propagating the religion. Another thing that he taught the Prophet through this was that he said, فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّ, immediately pray, because what prayer does, it calms you, it gives you that sense of purpose again, because you're leading towards doing something which is going to help you find better consequences as a result. Hence why everything that you see in the Quran or any textual thing, contextual thing from even the prophets from before, it was always prayer. When Yunus alayhi salam was tired of his people because he stopped understanding how to sort of propagate the message to them, he got stuck in a whale. What did he do? He prayed, La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minadh dhalimin. So there was prayer involved. Everything comes with prayer as a result of immediate grief and sorrow. And that was the first action that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. And then what did he say? He mentioned the whole element of slaughter. Wanhar. فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ wanhar. Why did he say slaughter? What context is God giving here to the Prophet? Wanhar, slaughter of camels. Why would you bring about slaughtering camels in this realm? I've just lost my son. Why would you say that to me? One of the reasons why that was is because he's helping the Prophet understand that his future has to be to get the Muslim community to a stage where they have enough wealth amassed that they're able to slaughter camels for the sake of the religion. When they're doing Udhiyah, when they're doing the Dhabah for Hajj, that's one of the reasons why he wanted the Prophet to have his focus shifted there. So shift the focus immediately to understand that there's more to come. And that's how our life is. There's more to come until your journey ends and you return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the shift in focus. And that's what initially that's what he wanted to do for the Rasul. And how long did it take the Prophet to propagate or actually do that? 15 years. It took him 15 years after that revelation to actually get to a stage where the Muslims had amassed so much wealth and they were able to slaughter, and he was able to slaughter 150 camels by hand. So lessons come through sorrow. That's the context of why these surahs have actually been attributed. And
then also after the sorrow, what this is place asking from, okay, like, I understand that the sorrow and everything, the Prophet of course he went through sadness and stuff, but then Allah SWT is telling us, look, you and God goes in order, and that's physically as well. So again, it's not really, he is human, like Imam says that he's a human, but he's not human. You know, there's a famous quote. So again, it's like the year of sorrow happened and everything's a lesson for us, but then he's reminding us that look, he's not like you. You know, he physically went past all of the cosmos and everything. He went towards Allah. Where is Allah?
In terms of his experience,
Yeah,
definitely.
But that's physically and mentally.
But on a subjective level now, and this is what we speak about in terms of depression, like he was capable of feeling depression, he was capable of feeling sadness, and essentially I guess we speak about depression, and you know, we can give it so many different connotations, but it's a deep sadness, it's a deep level of sadness, right? And as Yunus was saying
Is
as
it
well.
prolonged sadness or is it just a deep sadness?
It can be. It doesn't need to be prolonged. It can be just deep
So I thought it
sadness
was
as well. I mean, and obviously, then we talk about deep sadness. I mean, that could be grief as well in a certain
Yeah.
light and all these kind of things. So it's very important. But grief can lead on to sadness and all these kind of things. And it's a very blunt definition here of placing too much or too little value upon Allah, and neglecting and misrepresenting Him. But then, on an experiential level, we know that there's such a thing as high-functioning depressed individuals, high-functioning individuals who have anxiety, stress, and all these kind of things. And it's the same with depression. It's like, despite even feeling that, like, you know that I need to do this regardless. It's like you still maybe have some level of correct valuation within your life. It's just maybe in this contextual situation, I don't, and so I'm. This is leading me to this deep sadness, this depression, but I'm still able to function in terms of looking after my kid because they need to get to school. And if they don't have me, who else do they have? And who's going to cook? And who's going to do this, that, and the other? And so.
So sorry, what would you say the definition for depression is?
You're
basically saying whoever has too much value on God, they all depressed, so every golfer is depressed.
No, because
So what's I'm trying to go from.
yeah, I get what you're trying to say. Obviously, we're talking about it in the context of Islamic cycling and psychology and counselling. But for now, if we're talking about kafirs, it's like Allah is not the highest source of the truth for them. That's themselves. And then for them, it would be incorrect placement of themselves, incorrect placement of who they are as individuals, because they're their own highest level of the truth. Of course, we recognize that as being incorrect. But this is tailored more so to us as Muslims, individuals who are coming to psychology and counselling from an Islamic perspective. So you place the highest level of the truth at that definition.
Say definition. Again, it comes back to that. You say if you place I won't say correct, but as an individual in your life or whoever it is, saying to even the Prophet was saying he was quote unquote depressed. So where's the definition there? Was it placed too much value in God? Was it placed too less value in God?
No, I don't think so. You know when you
No,
talk about
what's the original definition you write down for depression?
so when you're talking about
There's a psychological definition, there's an Islamic, there's a spiritual definition, there's a definition in the sense of knowledge as well. It's like if you haven't got the correct knowledge of Islam in the first place, it's like how do you even know who Allah is? And then you've got to go to the mental approach in terms of the definition of where your source of depression is coming from or your experience of depression is coming from. So this is talking about the spiritual experience because we know that we're talking about depression on a spiritual level because that's the highest source or experience of depression. But there's also a mental level in terms of the knowledge that you've absorbed in that respect. And then physical in terms of what you're doing whilst you're in depression. Some people are just in bed all the time kind of thing. So that's how you're...
Makes sense. I was looking from the mental
from a definition of like the normal standard definition that people give towards depression is just a low level of sadness. A low level of basically a very lowly level of feeling a certain way. That's what people now define depression as. So you know the thing that you brought up earlier, prolonged, was it prolonged sadness? No, it wasn't. The reason why it wasn't prolonged sadness is if it was allowed to be prolonged sadness, then he wouldn't have said to the Prophet, it's a new day, it's a new dawn. The reason why he said that is because it's literally, don't worry, it's fine to feel this, but the future's amazing. Watch and you'll see. And he did. So there is a lesson for it for us all, and how Imran was saying that how much value we put on it is defined to each individual here, and your level of depression as a result of that either continue to wallow in it because you don't know yourself, and it goes back to the framework that we've all done. So when we go back to it, it's all about the self. It's all about how much value you put in certain things and what you deem as important and what choices are you going to make as a result of that for a better consequence. So all these little things that we have already learned and we have gone through, when you bring it from a Quranic element, when you bring it from the different stories of the prophets or the experiences the Prophet went through and the hadith, everything in a nutshell is literally to the self. How did he define that? What did he do as a result of that? What was the end goal? And ultimately, that's literally the journey that people go through when they're also going through stress, anxiety, and depression. How they channel that. One of them was prayer. The du'as that the Prophet stated to recite. Why why would he tell us to recite the du'as of anxiety and depression and sadness? Why were there certain things that he would do? For example, one of the things that he would do when he was ultimately in his state of sadness was he would pray istighfar 100 times. Why did he do that? What is the context for that? One of the contexts given that the Prophet ﷺ would do that is so that he could go back to the submissive behavior to God.
That's why you're right to an extent, in the sense of like he didn't actually go through it, because he was sent as an example, right? He was sent as a messenger. He was the ultimate example for us. So I mean, he came out of it very quickly. Like you said, it wasn't a prolonged sadness. It wasn't a prolonged kind of period of depression or anything like that, because Allah said it's a new dawn, it's a new day. But there has to be some level of example, but there also needs to there's also importance placed now in terms of the time frame, like what we're talking about in terms of prolonged sadness and whatever it might be. Just because someone's depressed doesn't mean they need to be depressed for a long period of time. Someone could be depressed for a day. You could literally be depressed for a day, a few days, but this is why even grief is given 3 days from the Islamic framework.
So what would be the difference between sadness and depression? Now, where would you say someone's actually depressed?
There's the depth of it. It's
Yeah.
the depth of it, right? And this goes for any emotional experience. It's like the depth of it. Because now, if you see someone who's like elated, like on an extreme level of happiness, you might think they're a crackhead, because it's like you're just being crazy. You're like running around naked in the park or whatever. But he's just like really happy, because even that's wrong. It's like the depth of it is really important. You can be sad because you have to wake up for work. It's a Monday. You don't like it, but then, like I said, you're sad because of the loss of a loved individual or whatever. You have 3 days for that. If you go even deeper within to that sadness and you go beyond the 3 days, it can turn into depression, right? There are individuals who you might have seen or experienced, like who maybe the loss of a loved one is so heavy that they just can't go on in life.
It becomes your defined state.
And that then isn't grief anymore. That's depression. But then, I mean,
that is what sadness to depression is, and that's the reason why Islam avoided it with putting things in place. So the perfect example that he gave was the 3 days of mourning. If it was 30, 40, 50, 60 days of mourning, your state now goes from sadness to a state of a prolonged sadness of depression. Now it's because you're literally wallowing away with that. That becomes your state. You've now defined a state for yourself. So you're no longer being able to comprehend and see a way forward without that. And that's why these barriers or these things have been put in place to avoid that.
The defining measure that takes you out of this experience is your capacity and your capability, your knowledge, essentially, that we were talking about before, knowledge being power. It's like, if you already have the knowledge, doesn't mean that you're saved from the experience, because you're human at the end of the day. You're emotional. So you'll have the emotional experience, but because you know better, you'll come out of it quicker, as opposed to maybe someone who doesn't know better, who doesn't have the knowledge, who doesn't have the tools, the framework to be able to come out of it. And so it is possible in that sense, as an example from the Prophet's time, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he was able to come out of it so quickly because he was the Prophet.
Before the
yeah.
revelation of Surah Al-Hajj, the Prophet ﷺ went through that pause in revelation of Fatah. So I read that he felt suicidal and he felt like throwing himself out of the mountain tops. So would you say that state that he was going through a state of depression?
In terms of imbalance?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was, as I mentioned, that was a spiritual imbalance that he felt at that time.
Wasn't that a long period, the pause between
So it goes back to my original point as to what I was saying, is that why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have to reveal and recalibrate his thought process and say it's a new day, it's a new dawn? Because the sadness started to feel for the Prophet ﷺ, where it became his defined state. And Allah knew that he needed to shake up the Rasul at that moment in time. That's the message that was given from there as a result, and it's a message, holistic message to us all. So when you said about Imam Busayri, he's not, but he's human, but he's not human. No, he is human. Of course, that's a state that we will feel towards the Prophet ﷺ because he was a role model for us. But that's a great point that you make, is that the reason why everything was stopped, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala required the Prophet's mental capacity and his spiritual imbalance to become balanced again. And that's a lesson for us all, that when you do have these moments, where you do have these stop moments in your time, there's always a way out of it. How you're going to basically get your way out of it is going to be through your experiences, what you deem to be important, what you value. Again, going back to worthy and unworthy stress. What's worthy, what's not unworthy? And in that moment in time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling the Prophet was that right now what you're feeling is unworthy, and I'll explain to you why. And then he said, do you not remember when I took you from when you were an orphan child and I raised you as a result of via Khadija, who was an entrepreneur, and she was able to build you? He reminds the Prophet. So the 6 stages of Surah Al-Duha, the first 3 were calming. Let me calm him down. Let me be a comforting soother for the Rasul. So it was initially calming the Rasul. Then the next 3 verses were teaching the Rasul himself, of reminding him of the favors that were already given to him. So basically calibrating his mind process to say, remember what you have in front of you. You've got an amazing life. You've already got to a stage where you've been able to build yourself from being an orphan at such a young age, trying to open an orphanage at the age of 20, which was failed, then having people in your community tarnish you because you're from the tribe of Quraysh, etc. And then the last 3 were, okay, these are action points, Ya Rasul, that you can do and everybody can do if they do ever get to the stage of prolonged sadness. So when we talk about these definitions, and Khalil always says this, and he's quite big on this, and this is such a big thing like from our framework, is that let's not get too bogged down on definitions.
And we don't absolute everything either. There's no absolute within the definition either. It's like something can be 2 things at once, 3 things, 4 things at once.
100%. And these states that people go through can be shifted very, very quickly. But the lessons in there are what is deeper, I guess, from it as a result of it. And the most important thing is to lead with courage and resilience as a result of that. Didn't the Prophet become a better person as a result of that? Of course he did. He led with courage. His final sermon before he passed away, amazing things that he said in there. So again, it shows that the journey that he had to go through in terms of his growth was always going to be present. So even the other prophets who came from before, Musa alayhi salam, got tired of his people. Yunus alayhi salam, same, the journey that he went through. Nuh alayhi salam, his family, Lut alayhi salam, with the people and how their behavior was exasperating for him. Different states, different feelings, different emotions, different ways of going through it. Hope that helps.
No, that's an amazing conversation. Jazakallah for bringing it up as well, man. Great discussion point. But makes sense on a level of depression, when we're defining depression, speaking of how to kind of deal with it, how it starts from the spiritual aspect, all that kind of stuff. Anything else? Cool. I'm guessing you guys have seen this graph already. The stress, anxiety, and depression graph, right? Cool. So
You guys have been given copies?
you've been given copies as well, or is that the first graph?
That's the one.
That's the first graph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'll get copies of
You
this.
get copies of this.
So this is the stress, anxiety, and depression model.
Yeah, so this is the stress, anxiety, and depression model. So you take any case, whether it's a stress, anxiety, or depression case, and you work through it similar in fashion to the first model and the first graph, and you place it wherever it may need to be. So if it's a stress case, you obviously start from a place of body action, or it could be a case of knowledge within that stress case as well. You've got to assess the situation correctly. But stress being a physical one, I mean, it may be a good starting place to start off with the body, see whether their actions, their habits, all these kind of things are correct. I mean, if it's a external kind of situation that's going on with them, can they take mastery of their environment, like the Kyle Rift point that Mulna was explaining. But if they're applying incorrect knowledge to their reality, if their principle to situation, if their circumstance, it doesn't have the correct knowledge kind of applied there, you move over to the mind stage, right? And you take meaning and knowledge from past situations in terms of where it was maybe executed incorrectly, they weren't applying the correct knowledge, and as a result the action was incorrect, and so it's knowledge from their past circumstances where they've, as I say, done things maybe incorrectly, unlearn, relearn. Imam Ghazali's 3 stages are applicable in that sense. And we haven't done a lot of past, present, future here, but all of these slides have orientation of time with regards to stress, anxiety, and depression, and how it kind of applies. So I guess, I mean, if we're looking at stress as an example, which we are, it's often triggered by unresolved obligations or missed opportunities lost in the past, lost in distractions in the present. Lost in distractions in the present, or driven by fear of losing worldly success or status. So it's like a fear of the future, misplacement of the present, or unresolved obligations, missed opportunities. So I guess wishful thinking within the past, wishful thinking in the sense of not taking correct action. So in that regard, past, present, and future here, you can use to your advantage. So past, as I say, more so from knowledge, from the learning perspective. The past is always there for us to learn from, and so you can use their past experiences to say, oh, you didn't take control of this opportunity as a stress situation in the past, which is why it caused you stress. Sorry, bro.
Sorry, I don't want to put in there.
Yeah.
Would you say that a human's always within one of these 3 all his life then, and that's the jihad?
Probably more so applicable to the first model, the first graph, in terms of the way you're thinking. So we have a similar graph for module 1, where it's a graph of the nafs, stages of the souls, exactly. So we've got the nafsul amara, lawama, and nafsul mutma'inna, and an individual is always in one of the 3 stages, or they're in between.
Does this link with that or not?
This does link with that to a certain extent, because you've got mind, body, and soul on there as well, and so mind, body, and soul is here, and you've also got past, present, and future in a certain regard. So it does link in, but this is more so applicable and easier to kind of flow through when you're in a session, at least, for stress, anxiety, and depression. And that one more so when speaking regarding principle 1 and principle 2. So where they place themselves, how they're carrying themselves, and all these kind of things. But you're absolutely right. So
just for recollection, is everybody aware of Imam Ghazali's 3 stages? First module. Anyone? Sure. You should. So
Imam Ghazali's 3 stages when dealing with the sin.
So when he's talking about the mind knowledge element here, when you bring it up to past and finding meaning moving forward, one of the stages of dealing with it is from the 3 stages of Imam Ghazali.
So Imam Ghazali's 3 stages, as I say, is when dealing with maybe unhealthy habits, sins, difficulties from an actionable standpoint, and so of course the mind comes into play here, because you're trying to unlearn, relearn. Imam Ghazali's 3 stages is that if you're dealing with a difficulty, the first step, and it's like the Alcoholics Anonymous 12 steps kind of
control and then drown it out.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly, perfect, Nabil. So you try to stop it. If you can't stop it, then you try to control it, and if even that's difficult, you drown it out with goodness in other areas of your life. So of course, trying to stop what you might be doing, or you have done for such a long time, will be such a difficult thing to do a lot of the time. So usually the first step isn't the most actionable. It's trying to control it. So maybe for example, an individual who's sinning, maybe they only sin on particular days rather than every day of the week. Maybe they have a particular environment in which they only sin, and they don't sin in public, they only do it in private, and then that is the difference between gentle and harsh sins.
Or they find other areas to excel in, which will then result in that area which they're struggling with to eventually come to a place where it softens them and then gets to a healthy place.
And that's the drowning out with goodness in other areas of life. So at the very least, you excel in other areas of your life, you do so much good in other areas of your life that it drowns it out, and alhamdulillah, it's not affecting everything and your entire life.
It's giving hope.
That's it. So one of the key things from client sessions, especially with people who are struggling with these elements, is to, when you are talking about past experiences, because a lot of sadness, and a lot of why people are going through these emotions, raw emotions, is because of a trauma that they probably have struggled with from the past, or they're unable to find meaning as a result of something which has happened, which is quite defined in their life. Now, one of the things that we have to do, and is very, very important, that we don't conflate the two ideas together, is that a sin which is attributed is a sin, but we're not here to basically bring that into openness to these people here. They already are at a place or a stage where for them these things are alien at this current moment in time. They just want a way forward. They just want to basically find an opportunity to be able to recover and feel better again within themselves. So when you're doing these client sessions, especially when you're talking about the mind concept, these deeper spiritual concepts, and you're trying to find where it comes from a place of worthiness or unworthiness. One Quran ayah, which I think people should write down, I think you should write this down. 28th chapter. This is something so important. Allah says, لِكَيْ لَا تَأْسَوْا عَلَى مَا فَاتَكُمْ وَلَا تَفْرَحُوا بِمَا آتَاكُمْ. He says in the definition of English is that do not become too bereaved or sad with what has passed you. So don't become too exhausted with what has passed you. وَلَا تَفْرَحُوا بِمَا آتَاكُمْ. And don't become too happy with what's to come. An amazing way of balancing your state of emotions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the 28th juz, the 28th chapter. So do not become too sad and belittled with what has passed you, and do not become too happy with what's to come to you or for you.
Once in one, the College Irani story where he lost the will.
That's it.
Alhamdulillah.
That's it, exactly.
That's perfect.
Perfect way. So the Quran actually
And I think
mentions.
even the second side say the more happy you get, you can like to fall the harder.
Yeah, the higher you fall, the harder you drop.
You stop
Higher you climb, the
you
harder you
start
drop.
placing Allah in positions in your life that you don't even know how to attribute Him. So the famous story of the person who found his camel, and he goes, he placed Allah in such a wrong place. So it's things like this. So when we are doing these kind of sessions, very, very important when we come to the mind element, body.
So, in terms of the body, speaking, I guess, in terms of
The physical challenges.
let's stick to stress. And sorry, yes. So, the physical challenges when it comes to implementing correct action for stress in the present, it's taking. I mean, I guess what we're saying, if we're dealing with it on a body level, is that the correct knowledge is there. What's not there is correct action. It's like you know better, but you're not doing better. It's like you know what you should be doing, but you're not doing it. Again, when talking about stress, it's this level of inactivity, procrastination, misfocus, misdirection. A lot of that is like you know what you should be doing, but you're not doing it. You have an essay due, you have coursework due, but you put it off for so long. Of course, you're going to be stressed because you're not taking action. And so it's about making that mind-body connection between the two, the space in the middle, connecting mind and body together. And that's why mind and body is there at the bottom at present. And there's also soul and mind, but that moves further up on the graph, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But mind and body, it's about, you should be starting work within the last week at the very least, maybe for that essay of yours or that coursework that you've got. If you leave it too much later, you're going to be rushed, you're going to have to do late nights, your sleep is going to be affected, you're going to be even more stressed because you're not sleeping enough, you're not nourishing your body, you're not eating properly. So Imam Ibn Qayyim's two rules is that he who, I'm paraphrasing him on that, so he who values something greater than Allah, Allah will cause for him to become attached to it and then betrayed by it. It's like, so in that respect, I guess talking about the mind and body, if you're placing maybe too much importance, like, oh, I can leave it for 3 days, I'm sick, I've got all the knowledge, like I'll be able to do it kind of thing. Too much importance on yourself. And then you'll be betrayed by yourself. It's like, oh, I couldn't do it. Or, yeah, no, 3 days is enough. I'll do all-nighters. It's like you're placing too much importance on time. It's like you're going to do all-nighters, and then again, like the stress is going to be exacerbated because, sleep deprivation, again, the element of maybe not nourishing yourself enough, not being able to place value on other areas of your life, like you've got responsibilities as a husband maybe, or as a father, or as a son, as a caregiver, whatever it might be. And so, again, valuation and devaluation, because you're not placing the correct level of importance upon what Allah essentially says. And Imam Ibn Qayyim's two rules is like, he who places his trust in anything but Allah, because Allah is the ultimate source, and then the flow in terms of your responsibility in that kind of journey of the flow up until maybe, like you say, doing your coursework, the part that you play in it, the part that Allah plays in it, the part that dunya plays in it, all of it.
What was the
starts
second
from
one?
Allah.
The second one was
The second,
monkey. Okay.
he who attaches himself to anything other than Allah, Allah causes for him to be attached to it and then betrayed by it.
The first one, sorry. I got that one, didn't get the first one.
I know those are the two rules. So
Oh.
it's like attached and betrayed is the element
Attached
of
and
the two
betrayed
rules.
is-
Attached and betrayed. Yeah.
So just going to the mind and body as well, just on here, if you look at it, when you look at the attribution of stress to the body and mind, it's naturally things that we all struggle with or constantly is overthinking, mental clutter, excessive planning or worry about worldly matters. And the body, you become restlessness, feeling of restlessness, constant busyness and driven by activity without clarity or purpose. We all struggle with that. We find that we fail to find the level of purpose attributed to how important it is and how important it should be. And we do that. We misplace, that's the correct word, we misplace the ability to find where this, how purposeful is this in my life. And that's the brilliant thing that you should be doing for, as a client practitioner in these sessions, is giving them the ability to be able to find better solutions and better planning and better resourcefulness to be able to then find good defined purpose as to what they're going to be doing going forward and how it's going to help them hopefully de-stress, find solutions to resolve the anxiety or the troubles that they're going through on a day-to-day basis.
And what should be popping off as I guess a key word for you guys from module 1 is probably cognitive dissonance, right? Who can tell me what cognitive dissonance is? You guys have gone through it, right? Cognitive dissonance?
Yeah.
You've heard it before, yeah?
Yeah,
Alright,
yeah.
cool. So cognitive
Just don't
dissonance. Fair enough, man. It's all good. Cognitive dissonance being the gap between either mind and body and soul, mind and soul. It's the gap in between. And when we're talking about the fact that either you know better and you're not doing better, the gap in between is the dissonance. A dissonance means gap. Cognitive dissonance is the mind gap to the body. So, in that regard, if you know better and you're not doing better, it creates this dissonance. And when there's gaps, Shaitan always fills those gaps. It's like then you get waswasa, then you get all these kind of spiritual diseases because you know better, but you're not actioning it, and something else is going to take its place. Whether it's laziness, keeping yourself busy in other bad habits or whatever it might be. And so there's this element of cognitive dissonance is something which is very much applicable when it comes to this middle stage in particular, because the middle stage is the in-between between mind and soul. Either you're taking action because you're doing it maybe from a place of nafs, or you're doing it because of people and society, or you're doing it because of covering or from a shaitanic kind of perspective and stuff like that. So if you're not taking from correct knowledge in that regard, you're taking it from people or you're taking it from somewhere else, then of course there's going to be gaps. There's going to be gaps all over the place. You're going to feel disconnected. You're not upon fitrah, all these kind of things, all these things that we learned from module 1, right? Cognitive dissonance.
And it leads to an element of spiritual bypass, which also has been discussed in module 1, where you basically place Allah in a wrong place. You basically try to place Allah in a place which is even above which He says, and that's why in this module, when you know, one of the things is that there's no expulsion in Deen. You know, Deen is not, it's not overbearing for people. Like ikraha fi Deen, there's no expulsion in this religion. Like do not comprehend or take on beyond your means, and that's the situation and the reality that in essence we all have to sort of, that's where you find your purpose, because in essence if you're comprehending more or you're taking on more than what your capacity is, you're always going to be in a state of fight. You're never going to be able to find that result.
And then lastly, again, as a journey in stress, if we're moving up to the soul, mind and body, divine self, we're talking about future, we're talking about hope being the key thing here. For the individual on a spiritual perspective, and if I go up to the stress line as well, we're talking about the future being driven by fear or losing worldly success and status, and there's no meaningful connection to your work or life. It feels empty or aimless. So you can see how hope is a key theme and a key kind of thing to kind of instill and put forward. So the Eclectic House 10 principles kind of come here. You've obviously, you guys have gone through 5 so far, I believe, and the new one that we wanted to introduce as part of this Divine Self soul stage within the graph is dreams and goals. Because as I say, this element of hope is so important. Making dreams and goals a key point for individuals within their journey of stress.
So that's the sixth principle. The sixth principle is goals and dreams.
Because you have to have this aspiration of where are you going, and it's always a question of like what happens now going forward, and this is why there's not too much importance placed on the past. Importance is placed on the present and the future, because it's like, what are you doing now for your tomorrow? What are you doing now for your future? What are you doing at the moment that creates a better tomorrow kind of thing? And so your dreams and goals are really important. It's like, what does their future look like? Because if you're dealing with it from either stress, anxiety, or depression, it's like the future always looks bleak for them. It's like they're taking meaning from the past. This happened to me, and so my whole life is ruined now. And it's like there's no hope for. It's like my reputation has been tarnished now in the community because I'm so stressed at this public perception that maybe has been created, or whatever it might be. They're overvaluing the dunya, obviously, in that situation. So correct valuation and all these other things that we've been talking about previously come into place. But hope for the future, purpose is really important. So dreams and goals being a key thing there. Obviously, you speak about principle 1, principle 2 as a matter of foundation. Make sure they're correctly valuing that, and what are they doing in terms of themselves. Oh, sorry. What are they doing for themselves? All these kind of things, all very important things to take into consideration. But yeah, inshallah, principle 6 is dreams and goals. Very applicable in this model, but I'm sure you can see how it's applicable even still in module 1, and you will also see how it applies going forward into marriage counselling sessions, future modules, inshallah as well.
Can you run me through the 6 principles?
Dreams and goals.
No, that's the 6th one, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, you took my
Run me through exactly 1
Oh,
to 6.
all 1 to 6.
Yeah, so I'm alright on one page.
Quickly
yeah?
from there to that. So, for example, let's say someone's depressed and you say, dreams goals, I'm going to dream goals.
What was that? Sorry,
So
go
he
on.
says, I haven't got any dreams goals.
You haven't got any dreams and goals, yeah, exactly.
People
So
get that straight then.
So initially, like in essence, when you are leading up to these sessions and you are sort of slowly bringing about these principles, they have to come in an orderly fashion. And what I mean by that is the first thing you have to always do is with the self. So whenever you're leading client practitioners, it always have to be the reflection of the self first. And when we look at this stress, anxiety, and depression module, the self is so important to try to find the peace element for that person within themselves first. Because if that person doesn't have any peace and there's all the chaos and the toxicity surrounding, because a lot of the stress, anxiety, depression module comes from the external, like we mentioned, yeah? So a lot of that is what causes that person the chaos and the low self-esteem, and why they're basically covered and they don't have an ability to be able to move forward or look forward. And one way of getting to that position and place is to define the self. What is important for that person? And that's why the Carol Riff 6 points that are very, very important when it comes to the stress, anxiety, and depression module, because her 6 points talk about the level of self-acceptance, mastery of environments. You can allow yourself to be in a place where you've always wanted to be or prove yourself to be, personal growth. So when you are doing these sessions, these are sort of themes that you're leading on. You're talking about personal growth. You're talking about the ability to be able to comprehend what maybe has happened before, like we mentioned, the restlessness, the ability to find the comprehension of why they are not able to declutter. Why is there no purpose? Is there a reason for that? Does the restlessness come as a result of lack of training, maybe lack of athleticism in your life? Is the diet correct? all of these things are holistic. These are all the whole framework and the theme that we will talk about. That Islam is orthopraxy. These things are very, very important. The element of diet, the element of are your testosterone levels in your body as a man defined to where it should be? Is your estrogen levels too high? Which is why your moods are so low and your self-esteem are so low. So important, so key.
And what I'm not saying is perfect, because there's no one defined answer now. What you're asking, it could be a variety of different factors, characteristic factors, but the important thing in terms of approach towards it, if the person doesn't have any dreams and goals, if they don't have any aspirations, is like you have to meet them where they are. You have to understand, you have to have some level of empathy, and you have to meet them where they are, in the sense of, like, I get it, I get why you feel like this, why the future looks bleak, and why in terms of the future you think it looks like this and it looks like that. You have to meet them where they are and then journey with them, in the sense of, like, then you pull them up. You can't be up here and then they're down here and say, come. It's like they don't know the path. You have to come down to where they are, bring them up along with you, in a certain sense. And so it could be a variety of, like, maybe physical habits, like and dietary habits. It could be a case of taking care of their general physical well-being to begin with, and then you look at maybe their spiritual and mental kind of condition, because, you know, get their dunya right first, because they don't even have that foundational level of well-being at the minute.
And I think that's what's important, is whenever you are doing these client practitioner-led sessions, you're here to define an environment where you're separating the spirituality in terms of how their relationship with God is, because that's separate. In religion, I want people to understand this concept, is that your spiritual journey with Allah is separate to the spiritual journey in life that Allah expects of you. They're two separate elements, because prayer and all these things are defined as praiseworthy behavior between you and God. That's between you and Allah, and that's your relationship which is defined as a result of what you gain out of prayer. In essence, prayer is just praise, nothing else. It's just literally you proclaiming God's, you're just the testimony to God. Allah is great, Allah is great. Sami Allahu liman hamid, Allah is the one who has praised. That's all you're doing in prayer, is nothing beyond that. However, that's a separate entity in terms of what you're trying to refine for that individual at that moment in time. Brilliantly, as Imran put it, you're trying to meet that person where they're at in that moment. For example, if I go into a session right now with someone who is absolutely beriddled with sadness, they have no purpose in life, and I'm just like, 5 times prayer, please, Ishraq, and then you need to pray. Salat is this part, you have to pray all the salah involved, and I want you to pray Surah Baqarah and Surah Maryam tonight as well, please. Jazakallah khair, assalamu alaikum, we've wrapped up, let's move on. It's not going to happen. Not going to work at all. That's not what Islam is all about. In essence, this framework is so amazing because it teaches you the model of literally becoming a purposeful Muslim and putting these themes and places in the correct place. And in essence, that's what the Rasul was sent down for. Nothing beyond that. And then all the saints that came after, they created these models to basically unpack and literally find solutions, as opposed to be, you're so mentally incapacitated and you've now taken on the religion to be unbearable as opposed to bearable. That's what we do.
Unfortunately, you ask the majority of people, but go to Imam, but always told to pray. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
Yeah, spiritual bypass. It's a
Yeah,
spiritual bypass.
yeah. The majority of Muslims, that's all they say. It's not read Mars, do this, they'll be this.
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
This is why it's much less amazing.
Alhamdulillah, I'm glad.
Are you going to give me the 6 principles now?
No, alright, yeah. Or have you forgotten now?
No. I'm glad you said it again.
The
You got this one.
question is, how come you don't know this?
Yeah.
I do, but they've been misplaced.
A great answer.
Alright, rather than me telling them, you guys, even if you just say one each.
Principle one.
Principle one.
What's principle one?
Internal.
Yourself.
To the
Yourself.
self.
Internal and eternal, your relationship with yourself and Allah. Yeah. Principle 2,
External.
external, the dunya,
The
and
dunya.
temporary.
That's it, temporary. And everything attributed and associated to it.
Principle 3.
Meaning and intention.
Well, you can't be the only one giving out all these answers, man.
Looks like
Where's
it is.
everyone else?
He's got one around his bedroom.
So give us some context for that, meaning and intention.
So having the correct meaning and leading with the correct intention. Sort of links to value association as well. How you're defining this correctly with the correct meaning.
Brilliant, yeah. And principle 4, anyone?
Choices and consequences.
Yeah.
Hey,
Whereas on it.
There you go, found it now.
So,
I told you the
number one is the self. Number two is external, so everything attributed around the self. So dunya, temporary. Number three, meanings and intentions, that we mentioned. And number four was choices and consequences. Number five,
Purpose and sincerity.
and number six, which we did today.
Dreams and goals.
Dreams and goals.
That's all 6 principles of Britain.
Alhamdulillah. That nicely brings us towards the end. So,
Jazakallah for that.
no, Jazakallah for entertaining me among prayers as well. Allowing us to be entertained.
Is Khalid still with us, or is he on the?
He's in Morocco, he's in
So
Fez.
we've become the Men in Black now.
No, I mean, he's still with us on the stream, or is he?
No, he's not.
Yeah, he's still on. We'll turn it off. You know, if you don't want him to hear this.
No, it's okay.